Hey everyone, welcome back. We're diving into a really interesting topic today. You guys sent in some really insightful pieces about what it's like to be a new Muslim, especially in Western society. So we're going to try to unpack that a bit.
Yeah, it's a rich topic for sure. Touches on so many things: faith, identity, even how we build our lives, like the really big stuff.
It is, and it's something we want to be really mindful of as we go through this material. So think of this less like, a debate and more like we're all exploring this together.
I like that, an exploration. Let's do it.
Okay, so flipping through everything you sent, three big, challenges really jumped out. Cultural differences, like just navigating a whole new set of norms. Then there's the social pressure, how people react, and then kind of on your own journey, finding your place within the actual faith.
It's true. The source material even uses that analogy, like being in a totally new city, maybe even a new continent, where you don't know the rules. And just like that, there's definitely a learning curve figuring out how your own values fit with things.
Right, exactly. And the source doesn't waste any time getting to that first hurdle, cultural differences. This idea of like instant gratification being a big thing in the West, that really stuck with me. Did that resonate with you?
Yeah, I mean, it goes way beyond just like surface stuff. We're talking about centuries of different philosophies, different histories, how the West versus the Islamic worldview, the individual, the community, even time itself is different.
Wow, yeah, when you put it like that, it makes you realize it's more deeply rooted. The source even argues that these ideas of the individual versus the community, they're always kind of bumping up against each other, but nobody really talks about it head on. Do you think if we understood those differences better, we could actually, bridge cultures better?
Such a good question.
Yeah.
And it kind of gets at the heart of what the source offers up as a solution. Community. And not just fitting in, but a space to process all these feelings, all these different viewpoints, but in a way that feels safe, supportive.
Totally. And that need to belong, to be understood. It made me think about Sarah's story, the one in the source material. She talks about feeling so stuck between her values and just the culture all around her. And it wasn't until she found her mosque, connected with other Muslims, that she finally felt seen, like someone got her.
It's so true. Sarah's story is like a case study in the power of shared experience. You can understand a faith intellectually, but to live it, to really feel it, you need people who get it, who've walked that road. It's in those communities that faith goes from an idea to something real.
100%. And we're just scratching the surface here, folks. We've tackled the inside stuff, the cultural differences, but buckle up because we're about to get real about the external pressures new Muslims face.
Yeah, it's a journey for sure, all those internal shifts. But the source doesn't stop there. It's like they knew we'd be ready for more. They bring up the social pressures, like how your relationships are affected. And that hit hard.
Totally. You're already in this new space, figuring things out. And then there's this whole other layer of how do I even begin to explain this to the people I'm closest to? The source really nailed that feeling of vulnerability.
Yeah, and that's where those cultural assumptions, the ones we were talking about before, they can really trip people up. It's not always outright rejection. Sometimes it's more about what's not said, fear of the unknown, and that's where things get messy.
And the source does a good job, I think, of showing that there's a psychology to it. Resistance to change. It's not always coming from a bad place. It can be about worry, wanting to hold on to what's familiar. But like the source says, communication is so key, but it's got to go both ways.
Absolutely. It's more than just you explaining yourself. It's about really hearing where the other person is coming from, building that bridge. And that takes effort, empathy, patience, all of it.
It's true. It's almost like learning a new language together. Both sides have to be open to figuring it out. And Ahmed's story, the one about his family pushing back on his conversion, that one really stayed with me.
Oh, Ahmed's experience is such a powerful example of how hard those conversations can be, but also how much they can bring you closer. His family, their resistance, it all came from fear, from not understanding. But because he stayed open, because he educated them, he didn't just change their minds, but he made their bond even stronger.
Right. Sometimes the scariest conversations, the ones you want to avoid the most, those are the ones that matter the most. But, and the source makes this really clear too, it's not just about the outside pressures, the people around you. There's also the internal work of actually living the faith, the practices, the rituals. That's a whole other layer, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, it really is another whole world, isn't it? We've talked about fitting in, dealing with people's reactions, but now it's the source takes us right to the core, the internal stuff, the practices and rituals of Islam. How do you actually live this?
It's so much more than just memorize this prayer or don't eat that. It's about those practices becoming part of you, part of your everyday. and understanding why those traditions are there, what they really mean. And that's got to be where having good information, good guidance is so important. The source talks a lot about not just doing things blindly, but really searching out knowledge, right? Like asking why, finding answers that make sense for you.
Right, and we keep coming back to community, but this is where it's so key. You've got classes, books, people to learn from. That structure is huge. But learning alongside others, especially other new Muslims, that's where things click.
Totally, it's like they're on the same journey. Oh. The source actually uses this phrase, legitimate peripheral participation. Sounds complicated, but it basically means learning by doing. Like, think about if you learned to cook with your grandma, you didn't know all the fancy terms, but by being there, helping out, it just made sense.
Oh, I love that. It really captures how powerful that is, being around others who are figuring it out too.
Yeah.
You learn not just what to do, but the why, the feeling, all of it.
And the source, instead of just saying that, they give us Fatima's story. She was really struggling with prayer at first, right? Too much, too new. But going to classes, studying with others, she found her footing. Even something as personal as prayer, it's better together.
So true. We might think of faith as this solo journey, but it grows when it's shared, when we support each other, when we belong.
So as we kind of wrap up our deep dive here, I think the source makes one thing super clear. Being a new Muslim, especially in a Western society, it's going to be tough. Culture clashes, social pressure, figuring out a whole new way of life.
Absolutely challenging. But those challenges, they also bring incredible chances to grow, to connect, to understand, to build bridges between cultures, between faiths. It takes courage, it takes being open, but there's so much beauty in that.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And if you walk away from this with just one thought, I hope it's this. Making space for people, making them feel welcome. It's not about big speeches, it's the little things. Being kind, being curious, listening, making sure everyone feels like they're seen, they're heard, they matter. That's what it's all about.
It's ongoing, learning and growing and connecting. And in the end, it makes all of this better.
So well said. Thanks for being here with us for this amazing deep dive. Until next time, keep those questions coming, keep learning, keep building those bridges in your own way.